And we're back here for part 2 on how to leverage a peer mastermind group to accelerate your business. Let's jump in. So far, you talked about peer masterminds between like leaders. What about within a company?
So the idea of a peer mastermind, of course, is people who have approximately the same responsibilities, but in different. So absolutely, the concept can be used internally. And here's a couple examples. Number one, a professional service firm where there's a whole bunch of different partners running different practices, or within a particular group. Now, I'm not saying that this, subverts, if you will, but what this does do is brings in out of structure, agglomeration, professionally facilitated in order to achieve a particular objective. Let's say there's an industry network, for example, where people are partners, but they're in different geographies, they are in different areas, but they're in one particular industry or a particular practice in different geographies, etc. And bringing them together when an internal peer mastermind with is very different than the usual way of doing it. Here's another example. You're a multinational or multi-location area, and you've got a business head, okay, in different geographies, or maybe not the most senior person. You've got people responsible for a particular function in different geographies, different business units in the same geography, bringing them together in a professionally facilitated mastermind that upskills and I don't want to say forces collaboration, but puts in place the structure for an enhanced collaboration and sharing, both builds the relationship between everybody at that particular level, but also allows them to share some of the things that they're actually doing. So absolutely, there's a role for internal masterminds. Where organizations can get into the problem is that they think that, well, gee, why don't we just get somebody internally to facilitate it? And that's a bit of a challenge because sometimes people who are internal facilitators may not have experience actually being facilitation. They don't bring the naivete of an outsider to ask questions and poke perhaps sometimes at the sacred cows and say, why can't we do it that way? Or what's stopping us from this? Or how might this be done? Or have you considered this approach? And some of those kinds of outside pieces of wisdom, if you will, experience are the things that are just the thing that everybody in that particular role needs to actually sort of make a significant difference and also develop the same vocabulary.
You mentioned earlier that there's a cost to participating in a peer group mastermind, but we know that incubators, accelerators, associations, private individuals are organizing these groups for free. In my mind, when I think of the paid groups, and in my mind, tell me if I'm wrong, they're not this small bursting group of people being facilitated. It is more of a top-down sort of like group learning setting.
Okay, so let's just deconstruct this, okay? Um, there are things that are called masterminds that are being sold, where it really is instructor-led training in a cohort. Sometimes it's called group coaching. Sometimes it's called masterminds. There's all kinds, and you pay a big chunk of money, you go with the cohort, right? And it's down. It very much is down. And every once in a while, because it's almost workshop-y, there's some things that are done, you do it with a pair, you do it with a small group, you do it whatever, but it's very much a top-down thing. And they're called masterminds, right? They're called peer learning, but they're not. Right? So that's one thing, despite the common name. The other thing is people say, well, let's get together and we're just going to do a little thing, right? And once again, that can also be called that, right? But very often those things sputter out and there's no kind of one-on-one, you don't get the benefit expertise. What I'm talking about in the middle is a paid peer mastermind that's chaired by somebody who's done what you've done, who's maybe a bit further ahead or has got a little bit different experience, who then shepherds people through. But it's a peer-based thing. It's not an education from the top-based thing, right? And I think that in that particular model, you get the best of both worlds because you get that IP, if you will, and that experience from that chair, Okay, but you also get learning from everybody else. That's why it's facilitated as opposed to trained, like that first kind of paid group cohort kind of group coaching that sometimes use the word peer, sometimes use the word mastermind. I think it makes it very messy because um, some of that first model masquerades as the other, but it's not, right? And some of the um, ones that are peer, actually, maybe I'll take it from another perspective. How can you tell that in fact that this is truly a peer-based mastermind? You take a look at the chair and you say, is this chair in the does this chair have experience doing that which everybody else in the group is in the midst of doing as well? You know, my particular case, I've started and sold several companies. I was a senior exec at an American public company. I sit on a public company board. And yes, I've written 8 books and all the other stuff that you said at the very beginning. Okay, so yeah, I've got stuff that I can teach the group, but my role is not just to teach the group, right? My role is to facilitate and make sure that the intelligence comes out from everybody around, right? And to set up a structure so that um, it keeps it fresh, right? And so that people say after every single meeting, gee, if I got a lot of interesting ideas here to explore. Most leaders, it's not that they don't know the answers. They sometimes just don't know the questions. So if somebody comes up with a perspective or a question that's around the table, most people can say, yeah, I think I could figure it out this way. Right. And when people say, gee, I haven't thought about that, it's the I don't know what I don't know sort of problem solved writ large. Other people don't know what they don't know, but different things. So it's that job of the facilitator to pull those things out so that there's greater value overall, which is very different from that first model of let's go through this process and at the very end, you cohort will be finished. No, this is the question of actually helping each individual later skill up, okay, and as an individual, but also for their organization.
I participated in two very expensive business growth group learning programs that were, a very nice blend of this, top-down group learning with, expert-led workshops, but also that, you know, uh, sharing ideas, experiences, facilitation aspect of it. They were wonderful experiences. They were geared for the top employee of the company. But in both cases, I was not the owner or leader of the founder of the company, but I was selected as the driver and high performer to go send and learn and participate and accelerate the business. And in both cases, was extremely successful for the business. Do you think this is like inappropriate to send someone who's not the leader? Like, is this, or looking back on it, I do reframe it that I sort of was the leader and that's why I was there.
Rania, you are definitely a leader. Okay. And so yes, you were where you were before. They chose right for you to attend. But I think that that's very different, okay, between that and what I call the peer mastermind experience. And the reason why is the peer mastermind experience is a very, very intimate, smaller group experience, as opposed to what you're describing is a community of peers, okay, that also has access to training and maybe a discussion group, et cetera. Okay, there's merit in that. Okay, it's just a different thing. And so the question of the appropriateness of somebody sending, is part of the thing. You know, somebody wants to spend their 10 grand or so to apply to be part of a, you know, peer mastermind group from the Brain Trust. Okay, if they're not a good fit, right? If everybody is CEO, 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 okay, manager of HR, okay, which of these things does not fit, right? So you want to make sure that everybody's the same thing. How about this one? Founder of pre-seed, founder of pre-seed, founder of a pre-seed company, founder of a pre-seed, and somebody who's just gone public. Okay, there's too much of a gap. And yeah, it'd be nice to take the money, if you will, but they're not going to the value that that person who's just gone public when they're with a whole group of pre-seed people, um, they're not going to get value. right? So it's much better to say, listen, I don't know if this particular group is right for you, right? Let's just wait and we find some other, if we're going to start another group, you might be a great fit for that one. And if they say no, no, definitely, definitely, I want to be because, and then you wouldn't have had known that is because I'm going to be starting another thing that is blah 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 blah. Say, okay, maybe you can get a lot of value out of this. Maybe you can contribute as well. But now all of a sudden, we're having a conversation, right? So I don't think it's a question of appropriate, right? But a group learning, an online community, a training based sort of thing is whoever wants, pay your money and you're in there. It's not a problem. And as long as you're adding value, as you did, everyone will say, yes, Rania is a person of quality. She knows what she's talking about, et cetera. She's giving as well as taking. But an online, a community, if you will, is very different than a peer mastermind group. It's a very, very different, intimate kind of experience.
Or the peer group mastermind, do you think it's best to like have the participants commit to like a fixed time frame with beginning, middle, and end? And as long as everyone, or is it as long as everyone's getting value, like you said, they continue? Like what's best for the group? Because sometimes energy does peter off.
Here's what we say. Okay, assume a 12 to 24 month commitment, right? And assume that, right? And if you've got 5 to 8 people, I know some of them have like a dozen, 16 people, but whatever the particular number is, okay, some people are going to drop off. All of a sudden they're no longer in the business. They've their children are now the CEO or something like that, or they sell the business, or they're just not interested, they're not getting value, whatever it happens to be, right? So fine, they can drop out and other people can come in. It's not like this, a peer mastermind is like 2 people or 3 people, right? There's a slightly bigger number, right? So my suggestion is think in your mind a 12 to 24 month commitment. It's not something, well, let me give it a try for a couple months and then we'll just see. And the reason why is because that way you get kind of retreat in the cycle. You can get a sense as to what kind of growth, et cetera. It certainly helps from your budgeting perspective, knowing what your time commitment and dollar commitment might actually happen to be. And it also gives a certain sense of continuity. Most masterminds stay together for 3 years, 4 years, et cetera. And then the needs of specific individuals may change. They may sort of go on or go off, right? So if everyone starts at the very beginning, one of the conversations that the chair should have in the one-on-one towards the end is how's it going? Having that meta conversation about the users, the members' specific experiences, right? Because if they say, something, it was going very, very, very well, but for whatever reason, there's a lot of talk, for example, about financing or about HR or technology, et cetera, that was less interesting to me. Really, where I'm dealing with is operations or supply chain. Those are my biggest challenges, right? And then, as a chair, you meet one or two other people, and they say, we really haven't talked about operations, et cetera. So you now get a sense as, if you want to think about what the curriculum or focus, if you will, about some of the in-person meetings, et cetera. Now you're getting feedback about saying, okay, well, we've got to do a little bit more operations oriented conversations, et cetera. So you can, as the chair, you curate that based on the feedback, which means that people will continue to get value from actually being there, right? As opposed to if you don't have those conversations, what do you think happens? It sort of goes sort of off to the side, right? And people start to say, I'm not getting anything out of this. And they either stay in the meetings and don't contribute, which is unfortunate because they really won't get value that way, or they just say it's not working for me. I thank you for your time. I'm moving on, right? So that might be the best decision for them, right? But you want to make sure, certainly speaking as a chair, that everybody feels like they're moving, that they're getting value along the way, and certainly on an annual sort of cycle, you want to just do a formal touch base at least once to make sure that that's actually happening.
You suggested, at least 12 to 24 month commitment for the participants, and ideally they would continue longer as they're seeing value. But you also said there will be attrition, people will retire, all kinds of circumstances happen. Do you recommend that the cohort that starts together like remain a closed group? Like if they start as 8 or 6 and there's attrition, like let's do people on board?
Yep. Yeah, because there needs to be critical mass, right? If you just have a cohort if you just have a pure mastermind of two or three, you're not going to get as much value from all of the other conversations, the other perspectives, right? And I think that sort of makes it a little bit more interesting. What'll happen is as everyone gets to know each other, people will start actually making one-on-one calls. Hey, in our last meeting, you talked about such and such. Do you think you might introduce me to that particular person? Or I'd love to see a demo of that, if you're open to it, right? Or you know something, I think that the kind of work you do, we need some of that help at our business, right? So there's all kinds of things that happen as the relationship and the knowledge between people actually starts to happen, right? So if there's a couple of people who drop off for whatever reason, you want to make sure that there's more people being brought in, right? Now, it's uh, at the very beginning, everybody likely doesn't know each other, right? But then bring people in midstream is also a bit of a challenge, right? And so that's another process that the chair's got to manage very, very carefully because everybody's got to buy into the fact that so and so would be a good addition to the group, right? So when they do actually join, they do feel welcome, right? And they feel respected even before they've had a chance to kind of participate and sort of demonstrate their bona fides.
Here when we work with clients, whether it's a one-on-one client, but more, really more so for the bigger commitments like retreats or, monthly training with teams, we always ask ourselves and the client, what kind of upfront work can we ask people to do so that they're primed and ready to show up to have a higher order conversation, right? So how does that play into the mastermind group? Like people know in advance the topics, they're going to be
So
prepared.
yeah, so that's a great question because on one hand, the idea of these peer mastermind groups is not to generate lots of work. People who attend are very, very busy people, right? So efficiency is something that's valued, right? Efficiency and effectiveness. So yeah, absolutely, there has to be some work beforehand, and it's essentially saying, okay, listen, um, uh, what's the what is happening in professionally and also in your personal life? Give us a summary, right? What's the challenge that you actually want some help with? If that's one of the things we're doing that. So if you're able to do that work beforehand, and if everybody is able to see that beforehand, it means everyone can take a look at it, right? And it means that when we're actually together, we can actually dive right into whatever the topic happens to be. You know, the challenge and getting feedback on a challenge is just one of the various different things as a chair that you might put to the group. Now that one's like every time you get together, there'll be that. But there's other types of things. There's a success showcase idea, right? Which is what's one thing that you've done that's made a significant difference to your business, right? And then you get a chance to boast about that particular success, but everybody else gets a chance to ask you about how you implement it or maybe some other particular detail because maybe they could take your great idea and implement it in their organization or maybe another section which I'll call the teach me section. If you as a leader have got a particular superpower, what can you do to teach everybody around the table how you use that superpower, how they can develop that superpower themselves, right? So if you're going to do, and there's a bunch of other types of segments that you might add into one of the days, but the idea here, more than anything else, is that if you do your preparation, everybody else will get more out of it. It's the problem of the commons in reverse. If everyone does a bit, everyone gains a lot, right? And so just, here's the form. Okay, fill out some of these things. It'll help sort of guide your thinking. It'll allow us to share it with everybody beforehand. And that means that everybody knows that you're prepared because, it's not onerous preparation. It's just making sure that the ducks are aligned. Everyone knows about it beforehand. Everyone can think about it beforehand. And therefore, the quality of the input that you're going to receive, right? And your ability to give decent input to other people will be just that much more powerful.
You talk about the value of an advisory group. We have another recording about advisory groups and getting the most out of them. in this peer group, there is a lot of taking, but also giving, right? The time is divided up. If there's 8 people, 4 people, 11 people, everyone has to take the rain stick for the appropriate amount of time. Um, if somebody is focused on accelerating their business and their own growth, I mean, wouldn't it be better for them to set up their own advisory board and get all those brains focused on them, on their business?
Okay. The answer is not an or. This is better than that. The answer is that um, there's a certain complacency that sometimes falls into a business, right? Where you're doing stuff in a certain way. Then all of a sudden, the growth sort of decelerates, or the challenges increase, or the risk suddenly increases. And so as a leader, what you want to do is you want to say, what's the stimulus? What are the new things that I can add in here to level myself up as leader, level the organization up? And so putting in place an advisory board, that might meet once a quarter and, helps keep you accountable as a founder, for example. That's got a particular place. Okay. And I think that if you don't have a board of directors that plays that role, you should put in an advisory board, right? I think that there's a role for business coaching, is that can drive really, really deep because of that one-on-one relationship and because of what the business coach can actually do, right? And I also think that there's a place for a peer group as well. And the reason why the peer mastermind, the place for the peer mastermind, is that you're not accountable to these people. You're not accountable to the chair of the group, right? This is a different aspect. A lot of leaders read a lot of business books, right? A lot of leaders take professional designations. A lot of leaders get their data from all these other kind of places, Google or discussion groups, whatever. I think that there's a specific role to have conversations with people at approximately your level, okay, and have that amplified together, right? That's a separate thing from having a coach, separate thing from having an advisory board. They all can sort of exist at the same time because they interplay and they have different roles and different purposes. Now, you're thinking, my God, I only have so much time. Okay, I only have so much time. What am I going to do? So the answer is always you do the things that will actually make the greatest difference. So, very often at a particular turning point, a coach can make a really, really big difference. Perhaps much more so than an advisory board, because the advisory boards maybe meets quarterly or whatever. That's it, right? But the coach is in there, and they've got a lot of stuff, and you can call them on demand, and you're paying them for their time to do precisely that, right? With respect to the peer mastermind, that can also deal with some of this, but it's a one level away, right? So, for example, you may want to say, well, how do other people do this? Okay, or how have other people, solved a particular problem, or how have they, and doing that as a group sometimes yields different perspectives than a coach who might be wired deep, 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 or an advisory board that's high, 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 right? So you got to decide, you've got so much time. These things do not take a huge amount of time because it's not hugely time consuming, right? But for people who do not want to coach, an advisory, a peer mastermind might be something that you want to try. People really like the idea of the peer input and the chair coaching, if you will, along the way. Guess what? The coaching that's in there every month, that's a fairly deep thing. The off month, 1 hour one-on-one with the chair of the group, it can solve a little bit of that, but it's not as deep, right? Because it's not as much time, right? So I think everyone's got to decide what they're doing. But what I wanted to do is really to say, hey, listen, this is something else, that this is another thing on the shelf that you have as a leader that maybe you hadn't thought about, right? And hopefully when you think about it, you think about us.
Randall, you get the final word. Are there any additional considerations you want to leave us with that we haven't yet touched on, or any final advice with regard to getting the most out of a peer group?
Yeah. I think it's I think it's important to think about how you choose a peer mastermind group. Okay. And to answer that question, you've got to go back and say, well, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Is it some specific problem? Is it professional development? Is building a network? Is the shaking things up? Is to get, unbiased, confidential guidance from a group of people, or learning how, other people, build in structure and systems and processes? Like, what are you trying to accomplish by that? Because once you sort of understand kind of what you want and need, then it becomes easier to say, okay, so what's the chair? What's the chair's skills and capabilities, and how might working with that chair in this peer mastermind actually do it? Because if you know that you're interested in X and the chair has got no experience in that X, that might be a bit of a problem. So you want to make sure that's a good fit with the chair. Number two, I think, is to get a sense as to what's the proposed makeup of that particular group, right? Because different groups have different sort of strategies and everything. And I think it also depends on, what's offered beyond the group meeting itself. Is there the bi-monthly one-on-ones? Is there the retreat? Is there IP that's connected? Is there a portal so for asynchronous conversations? Is it are you interested in something that's um, a factory kind of gee, this is our business just doing masterminds and we want to just sell mastermind things? Or are you looking for something where there's other modes of delivery as well? So for us, for example, we do not offer peer-based masterminds around the world, right? But guess what? We do offer coaching. We do help you set up advisory boards. We offer training. We offer ongoing CPD. We run retreats, etc. So how does what you might be doing in one place combine with some of the other things, right? So it's the question of what you want to get out of it first. I think the most important thing is having the conversations with prospective chair to make sure that is synchronized, because that'll make a huge difference to your particular experience.
Thank you, Randall, for the conversation, and thank you to everyone who's listening in. If any of the issues we talked about resonate with you, and if you are interested in joining a peer mastermind, do reach out. We'd be happy to learn about your organization and find that best fit cohort for you. Do email us at info@randallcraig.com, and we'll follow you on LinkedIn and follow us.